I watched my sister Victoria paint her nails with ruby sunset red at the breakfast table, her brushstrokes deliberate and slow, those pale fingers of hers moving with theatrical precision. She held her hand up to the light, admiring the glossy crimson as if she'd invented the color herself. When I knew with the bone-deep certainty that comes from living this exact moment before, that she'd stolen it from my bathroom vanity not 15 minutes ago. The same bottle I'd worn to my college interview yesterday. The same shade that the admissions director had complimented. The only warm moment in that entire anxiety-filled afternoon. "Oh, this color is divine," Victoria purred, catching my eye with that smile that never reached her eyes. "I just picked it up at the mall. Isn't it perfect for the Yale interview tomorrow?" My Yale interview, the one I'd scheduled 3 months ago, the one I'd been preparing for since freshman year, the one that was supposed to be mine. In my previous life, I'd cried when she did this. I'd screamed and protested and been labeled as the jealous, unstable sister. In my previous life, I'd watched helplessly as she copied everything. My clothes, my mannerisms, my dreams, my entire identity. And somehow made it look like I was the one copying her. In my previous life, I'd died at 24, poisoned by the sister I'd loved more than anyone. My body found in our apartment with her standing over me, tears streaming down her face as she called 911, the perfect performance of grief. But I wasn't in my previous life anymore. I'd woken up 3 years ago on my 15th birthday, gasping for air in my childhood bedroom, the taste of almonds still bitter on my tongue. The doctors in my past life said it was cyanide in my tea. Victoria had inherited everything: my trust fund, my fiancé, my design company, my life. She'd become me, the final and most complete theft. Now I sat across from her, 17 years old again, with clear polish drying on my own nails, and I smiled back. "It looks lovely on you," I said softly, and I meant it. Because in 3 days, when she showed up to my Yale interview wearing that shade, she was going to look exactly like what she was: a desperate copy of someone else's originality, a tacky imitation of authentic beauty. I'd already changed everything else. The abuse hadn't started with nail polish, of course. It had started the day I was born. My mother made no secret of her preference. Victoria was the miracle baby, born after 3 miscarriages, perfect and pink and wanted. I came 2 years later, unexpected and unwelcome, the pregnancy that nearly killed our mother and left her unable to have more children. She never forgave me for that. She never forgave me for stealing Victoria's spotlight as the only child. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" was the refrain of my childhood. Victoria got ballet lessons while I got hand-me-down shoes. Victoria got piano teachers while I got library books. Victoria got shopping trips and spa days with Mom while I got lectures about gratitude and not being spoiled. The irony of that last one still burned. Dad was no better. He'd wanted a son, and Victoria, with her assertive personality and athletic build, had somehow filled that role for him. They bonded over baseball games and business talk. I was too soft, too emotional, too female for his tastes. He tolerated me the way you tolerate a piece of furniture that doesn't quite match the decor, present but regrettable. Victoria learned early that she could do no wrong, and I learned that I could do nothing right. When I was 8, I won a regional art competition. The prize was a full scholarship to a prestigious summer art program. I was ecstatic. I'd worked on that painting for months, pouring every ounce of my child's heart into a watercolor of our backyard garden. It had been selected from over 500 entries. Victoria threw a tantrum. She screamed and cried and told our parents that I'd copied her style, that she'd taught me everything I knew about painting. It was absurd. She'd never shown the slightest interest in art, but my parents believed her, or they pretended to, which was worse. "You'll decline the scholarship," my mother informed me. "We can't afford to have Victoria upset before her dance recital. She needs to focus." I'd cried for 3 days. Then I'd stopped crying about anything Victoria did. The pattern continued throughout our childhood. I'd find something I was good at, something that was mine, and Victoria would swoop in and claim it. When I taught myself guitar and started writing songs, she took lessons and landed the lead role in the school musical. When I made the debate team, she joined and became captain. When I fell in love with fashion design, she suddenly discovered she wanted to be a designer too. The difference was she had resources. She had our parents' money, their connections, their unwavering support. I had thrift store fabrics and YouTube tutorials and the dim hope that talent might somehow matter more than privilege. It didn't. By the time we reached high school, I'd become a ghost in my own family. I worked part-time jobs to pay for my own supplies and activities. I studied in the library because Victoria had claimed my desk for her very important projects. I ate dinner in my room because family meals always devolved into Victoria shows where I played the audience no one wanted. The scholarship essay incident was what killed me the first time, though I didn't know it then. I was 16, applying for early admission to Yale. I'd written an essay about overcoming adversity, about finding my voice in a family that preferred I stay silent. It was raw and honest and the best thing I'd ever written. I saved it on the family computer in a password-protected folder. Victoria guessed my password in under an hour. It was Lily Pad Studio, the name I'd chosen for my future design company. She'd heard me say it once in a phone call with my best friend Marissa, just once. But Victoria had always been good at listening. She submitted my essay as her own application to Yale, word for word. And when I submitted mine 2 days later, Yale's plagiarism detection software flagged them as identical. I tried to explain. I showed them timestamps, drafts, everything. But Victoria's submission had come first, and she had our parents backing her story that I was the copycat, the jealous sister who'd always tried to steal her thunder. Mom and Dad provided testimonials about my concerning behavior and obsessive competition with my sister. Yale rejected both of us, but the damage to my reputation was catastrophic. Other schools heard rumors. My early admission applications turned into a nightmare of explaining something I hadn't done. Victoria got into Yale the next year anyway through a backdoor recommendation from our father's college roommate. I ended up at a state school, drowning in student loans because my parents refused to help me financially after the essay incident. At state school, I flourished despite everything. I won design competitions, built my portfolio, graduated summa cum laude. I got into a prestigious graduate program in fashion design in New York. I landed an internship with a major fashion house. I met Marcus, a kind and brilliant architect who actually saw me, who loved me for who I was. Victoria followed me to New York. Of course she did. She enrolled in the same graduate program, legacy admissions, naturally. She insinuated herself into my friend groups, my professional circles, my life. She started dating my intern coordinator, a petty and vicious move that cost me my internship when their messy breakup created uncomfortable dynamics. But I persevered. I always persevered. I launched LilyPad Studio on my 23rd birthday with money I'd saved from years of freelance work. Within 6 months, I had celebrity clients and magazine features. Within a year, I was being courted by investors. My grandmother, Dad's mother, who'd always seen through Victoria, passed away and left me her entire estate, a brownstone in Brooklyn and a trust fund worth $3 million. That's when Victoria really got desperate. She tried to copy my designs, but without understanding the fundamental principles, her work looked derivative. She tried to poach my clients, but her personality, charming in small doses, exhausting over time, drove them back to me. She even started dating Marcus while we were engaged, showing up at his architectural firm with coffee and sympathy during a rough patch in our relationship. Marcus chose me. He saw what she was, so Victoria poisoned me. It was so simple, really. She came over for tea, something we did every Sunday despite everything. I still loved her, even after everything she'd done. She was my sister. I kept hoping she'd change, that we'd find a way. Back to each other? She brought pastries from my favorite bakery. She made the tea herself, insisting I relax after a stressful week. We talked about her struggles, her failures, how hard it was to live in my shadow. I comforted her, told her she'd find her own path, that she didn't need to compete with me. She nodded and smiled and watched me drink my tea. The almond taste was subtle. I didn't realize anything was wrong until my throat started closing. By then, Victoria was crying, screaming for help, calling 911. She held my hand as I died, whispering, I'm sorry, over and over. The perfect grieving sister. The police investigated. They found nothing. The cyanide was traced to a pest control company we'd both hired months before, accessible to anyone in the building. No clear motive could be established. Victoria inherited my business, my trust fund, my brownstone. She married Marcus 6 months later after a respectful mourning period. She became me, the complete transformation she'd been working toward her entire life. And then I woke up on my 15th birthday, whole and alive and furious, with 9 years of memory that hadn't happened yet. I spent the first few months of my rebirth in a fugue state, trying to understand what had happened. Was it magic, divine intervention, a glitch in the universe? I didn't know and ultimately decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had a second chance and knowledge of every move Victoria would make. The first thing I did was change all my passwords to random strings of numbers she'd never guess. The second thing I did was start documenting everything. I bought a camcorder with my babysitting money and set up hidden cameras in my room, in my workspace, anywhere Victoria might snoop. I started saving my work on encrypted cloud drives she couldn't access. I kept meticulous records of every time she copied me, every time our parents favored her, every incident of theft or manipulation. The third thing I did was change my patterns. If Victoria wanted to copy me, I'd give her things to copy that would make her look ridiculous. I'd bait her with false plans and watch her waste her time and resources. I'd become unpredictable, inscrutable, always one step ahead. The nail polish was just the beginning. In my previous life, I'd worn bold colors, deep reds, rich purples, midnight blues, colors that made a statement. Victoria had copied every single one, showing up to my events wearing the exact same shade, making it look like I was copying her since she always managed to arrive first. This time, I wore clear polish. Always clear, sometimes with a subtle French tip, elegant and understated, classic. Victoria, unable to resist, started wearing clear polish too. But without understanding why it worked, without my sense of overall aesthetic, she looked unfinished. Her hands drew attention to her ragged cuticles, her uneven nail beds, the cheap acrylic tips. She'd gotten to make her hands look more elegant. Next to my natural, well-groomed nails, she looked like she was wearing nothing. Or worse, like she'd forgotten to finish getting ready. People noticed. Not consciously, perhaps, but the effect was there. At school events, at family dinners, at the college preparation workshops our parents insisted we both attend, I looked polished and put together while Victoria looked oddly incomplete. "Why don't you wear color anymore?" she asked me once, frustrated. "That red was so pretty." "I'm evolving," I told her. "Sometimes less is more." She didn't understand, but she copied anyway. She always copied. I did the same thing with my clothing. In my previous life, I'd developed a distinctive style. Vintage band tees with high-waisted jeans, leather jackets, bold accessories. Victoria had raided my closet constantly, and when I'd protested, Mom had said we should share since family is family. This time, I dressed simply. Well-fitted basics in neutral colors, minimal jewelry, quality over flash. I looked elegant. Victoria, copying my minimalism without understanding proportion or fit, looked bland and forgettable next to me. She couldn't figure out why the same approach that made me look chic made her look like she'd stopped trying. The secret was in the details she couldn't see. The tailoring, the fabric quality, the way I combined pieces. I spent my part-time job money on a few really good items instead of lots of cheap ones. I learned about color theory and body types. I made minimalism look effortless while Victoria just looked minimal. But these were small victories. The real war would be fought on bigger battlegrounds, college admissions, career opportunities, the things that had mattered in my previous life. I had to be strategic. I had to be perfect. The Yale interview was my first major test. In my previous life, I'd scheduled it for November 15th. Victoria, seeing the date on the family calendar, had thrown a fit until Mom called Yale and suggested they interview both daughters on the same day. Yale had agreed. Our father was a major donor, and Victoria had shown up wearing my outfit, my makeup, my perfume, even my talking points since she'd eavesdropped on my practice sessions. The interviewer had been confused. By the end, I'm not sure she could tell us apart, despite Victoria being 2 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier. Victoria had simply overwhelmed the space with her confidence while I'd shrunk, watching my sister steal my interview. This time, I scheduled my interview for October 3rd and told no one. I did my practice sessions in Marissa's basement. I planned an outfit Victoria had never seen. A navy blazer I'd found at a consignment shop, a white silk blouse, gray slacks, and pearl earrings I'd inherited from Grandma Rose. Simple, sophisticated, unmistakably mine. Victoria scheduled her interview for November 15th, the date she remembered seeing on the calendar in our previous life, a date I'd deliberately written there as a decoy. My interview went perfectly. Dr. Sandra Chen was warm and engaged, asking thoughtful questions about my design portfolio, my essay on sustainable fashion, my goals. She loved my passion for using fashion as a tool for social change. She said I reminded her why she loved her job. I didn't mention having a sister. When Victoria went in November, she wore a navy blazer, probably mine, white blouse, definitely mine, and those horrible tacky pearl earrings she'd bought at Claire's after seeing my real ones. She talked about sustainable fashion, my passion, and social change, my essay topic, with the confidence of someone who'd memorized words without understanding concepts. Dr. Chen, who'd already interviewed me, immediately noticed the similarities. I know because Marissa's cousin worked in the Yale admissions office and overheard the post-interview conversation. The Whitmore girl today was odd, Dr. Chen had said. Everything about her interview felt secondhand, like she was trying to channel someone else. Very strange. Victoria got waitlisted. I got an early admission with a full scholarship. When the letters arrived, Mom actually cried. Not from joy for me, from confusion that her perfect Victoria hadn't gotten in. Victoria locked herself in her room for 3 days. Dad called the admissions office to complain about obvious bias. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The real turning point came 6 months later, in the spring of my senior year. I'd been accepted to Yale, MIT, Parsons, and Phi T with full rides to all of them. Victoria had been waitlisted everywhere except a small liberal arts school in Maine that accepted her because of Dad's donations. She was spiraling, becoming more reckless, more desperate. That's when she found my design portfolio. In my previous life, she'd stolen my entire senior thesis, a collection of 10 original designs I'd worked on for 8 months. She'd submitted them to a prestigious scholarship competition under her name. I'd had no proof they were mine since I'd done all the work on paper in sketchbooks she'd subsequently stolen. She'd won $50,000 and launched her career on my work. This time, I'd been meticulous. Every design was documented with time-stamped photos, video recordings of my design process, and copyrighted through the U.S. Copyright Office. I'd kept the physical sketchbooks locked in a safe deposit box at the bank, not at home. But I'd left out decoy sketchbooks, beautiful, detailed designs that looked like my work, but were actually terrible ideas hidden behind pretty drawings, garments with impossible construction, fabric combinations that would fall apart, silhouettes that looked good on paper but would be unwearable in reality. Victoria stole them. Of course she did. I knew exactly when it happened because I'd set up a motion-activated camera in my room. I watched the footage of her, picking my lock, photographing every page of the decoy sketchbooks with her phone, carefully replacing everything to hide her theft. She submitted the designs to the Rising Star Fashion Scholarship, the same competition she'd won in my previous life. She submitted them in March. The winners would be announced at a gala in May. I waited until April to submit my real designs to the same competition. The deadline was April 30th, and I submitted at 11:59 p.m. on the final day. My designs were good. No, they were extraordinary. They were everything I'd learned in my previous life combined with the fresh energy of my 17-year-old self. Sustainable fabrics, innovative construction, wearable art that made a statement about consumer culture and environmental responsibility. They were me, authentically me, in a way nothing I'd created in my first life had been. Victoria had no idea what was coming. The Rising Star Fashion Scholarship Gala was held at the Metropolitan Pavilion in Manhattan. It was a huge event attended by industry professionals, fashion journalists, and representatives from design schools. The scholarship itself was $100,000, plus a mentorship with a major designer. It could launch a career. My parents drove us into the city, practically vibrating with excitement about Victoria's guaranteed win. They'd even bought her a new dress for the occasion, a designer gown that cost more than my entire wardrobe. I wore a simple black dress I'd sewn myself, elegant but understated. "Don't be jealous when your sister wins," Mom told me in the car. "Not everyone can be as talented as Victoria. You'll find your own path someday." I smiled and said nothing. The gala began with a cocktail hour, then moved into the presentation. 20 finalists had been selected from over 2,000 applicants. Their designs were displayed on mannequins throughout the venue, with the designers' names on placards. Victoria's name was displayed next to 10 of my decoy designs. My name was displayed next to 10 of my actual designs. Victoria saw my designs and went pale. She knew immediately what I'd done. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You copied me," she hissed. "You stole my designs and submitted them as your own." Did I? I smiled at her, the same serene smile I'd been practicing for months. "That's a serious accusation, Victoria. Do you have any proof?" She faltered. Because of course she didn't have proof. She'd stolen from me, and anything she tried to present as evidence would only incriminate herself. "I have proof of my design process," I continued quietly. "Dozens of videos, time-stamped photos, copyright registrations. Do you have the same for yours?" Her face went from pale to red. "You set me up." "I protected my work," I corrected. "There's a difference." The presentation began. One by one, the judges discussed each finalist's designs. When they reached Victoria's submissions, I watched her confidence crumble in real time. "Contestant number 7's work shows promise in conceptual sketching," one judge said, examining the garments Victoria had paid a seamstress to construct from my decoy designs. "However, the execution reveals fundamental misunderstandings of garment construction. This seam work is structurally unsound. The fabric pairings, while aesthetically interesting in theory, don't function together. This silk would shred against this wool blend within one wearing. And this silhouette." The judge held up a jacket that looked beautiful on the hanger, but had bizarre proportions. "This would be physically impossible to wear. The arm size are positioned incorrectly. The shoulder pitch is wrong. The whole thing would bind and restrict movement." Victoria's face burned with humiliation as the judges dissected every flaw I deliberately built into those designs. The audience murmured. Dad looked confused. Mom looked angry. Then the judges moved to my designs. Contestant number 14, however, shows exceptional technical skill combined with innovative thinking, the head judge announced. "These pieces demonstrate mastery of sustainable fashion principles, impeccable construction, and a mature design philosophy. The fabric choices are both environmentally responsible and aesthetically sophisticated. These aren't just pretty drawings, they're fully realized wearable garments that make a statement. This is exactly what we look for in our scholarship recipients." They put one of my dresses, a flowing gown made from recycled silk dyed with natural pigments, on a model and walked her across the stage. The audience applauded. Fashion journalists took photos. My parents sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. The Rising Star Fashion Scholarship, with its $100,000 prize and year-long mentorship with Vera Wang, goes to contestant number 14, Lily Whitmore. The room erupted in applause. I walked to the stage on trembling legs, accepted the award, gave a short speech about sustainable fashion and the importance of authentic creativity. Victoria sat in the audience next to our parents, and I watched her face cycle through rage, humiliation, and something that looked almost like fear. She was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that I knew. That I'd known all along. That I'd been 10 steps ahead of her this entire time. After the ceremony, a journalist from Teen Vogue approached me. She'd been investigating rumors of plagiarism in the competition, after an anonymous tip, from me, though she didn't know that, about suspicious similarities between entries. "Did you know that contestant 7's designs were photographed from someone else's sketchbooks?" she asked me. "We've received evidence that suggests those designs weren't originally hers." "That's terrible," I said, perfectly sincere. "Plagiarism undermines the entire creative process." "The evidence suggests the sketchbooks she photographed belonged to you." I paused, letting the moment breathe. "I did have some sketchbooks stolen from my room earlier this year. I filed a police report. But those books contained rough drafts and abandoned ideas. Nothing I'd ever submit to a serious competition. Whoever stole them would have gotten unusable designs. My real work was always kept securely protected." The journalist's eyes lit up. She smelled a story. "So you're saying..." "I'm saying that if someone stole my discarded ideas and tried to pass them off as competition-worthy work, they'd end up exactly where we saw tonight, exposed as someone who doesn't understand the fundamentals of design. You can't steal talent or knowledge. You can only steal the surface, and the surface is never enough. The story ran 2 days later. Fashion prodigy outsmarts would-be plagiarist sister. Victoria was named, our whole family drama was exposed, and suddenly I wasn't just a scholarship winner. I was a survivor, a genius who'd outsmarted her abuser, a symbol of authentic talent triumphing over privileged mediocrity. Victoria's acceptance to the liberal arts school in Maine was rescinded due to the plagiarism scandal. She tried to claim I'd framed her, but the evidence was overwhelming. The motion-activated camera footage of her stealing from my room, the police report I'd filed about the theft, the copyright registrations proving my design's creation dates, the videos of my design process. Yale sent me a personal letter congratulating me on my scholarship and reaffirming their excitement about my enrollment. They also quietly suggested that my sister might want to reapply in a few years, after taking time to develop her own artistic voice. Mom and Dad were horrified, but not at Victoria. They were horrified at me for humiliating my sister publicly and destroying her future. Dad threatened to cut me off financially, which would have been more impactful if he'd ever supported me financially in the first place. "You've ruined her life," Mom screamed at me when we got home. "All because you're jealous. All because you can't stand that she's better than you." I looked at her calmly. She stole from me. She committed plagiarism. She did this to herself. "You set her up." "I protected my work," I repeated. "And if protecting my work means Victoria faces consequences for her choices, then so be it. I'm done being her doormat." Victoria didn't speak to me for the rest of senior year. Neither did our parents. I moved into Marissa's house for the final months before college, and Marissa's parents, who'd always treated me like a second daughter, supported me completely. I graduated valedictorian. Victoria didn't graduate at all. She'd been so distracted by the scandal that her grades plummeted and she had to take summer courses to get her diploma. I left for Yale in August with my scholarship, my award money, and a growing reputation in the fashion world. I left Victoria behind, still wearing clear nail polish because she didn't know what else to do, still trying to copy someone who'd learned to become uncopyable. But this was just the beginning. Victoria was wounded, not defeated. I knew from my previous life that a wounded Victoria was a dangerous Victoria. And I knew that the real battle was still ahead. She'd come to New York eventually. She'd try to destroy me eventually. She'd push me to the edge eventually. But this time, I'd be ready. College was a revelation. At Yale, I wasn't Victoria's shadow or the disappointing Whitmore daughter. I was just Lily. Fashion design prodigy, scholarship winner, the girl who'd exposed her plagiarist sister and emerged victorious. My story had made me something of a minor celebrity in design circles. I flourished. I studied under incredible professors, won every major design competition I entered, built a portfolio that had fashion houses reaching out before I'd even graduated. I dated occasionally, but casually. I remembered Marcus, remembered how that relationship had been used against me, and I wasn't ready to give anyone that kind of leverage yet. Victoria, meanwhile, was spiraling. She'd taken a gap year after the plagiarism scandal, ostensibly to find herself, but actually because no decent school would accept her. She worked at a boutique in our hometown, living with our parents, scrolling through my Instagram and seething. I know because Marissa's younger brother saw her doing it when he went into the boutique to buy a gift for his girlfriend. "She was literally sitting behind the counter looking at your pictures and muttering to herself," he reported. It was kind of scary, honestly. I'd blocked Victoria on all social media, but she could still see my public posts and the interviews I gave, the photos fashion magazines posted of me, the growing evidence of my success. Every achievement of mine was a wound to her, and she was bleeding from 1,000 cuts. She tried to copy my path again, applied to fashion programs at other schools, using her work at the boutique as industry experience. But the plagiarism scandal followed her everywhere. Application committees would Google her name and find the Teen Vogue article, find the expose in New York Magazine titled "The Sister Who Stole Everything," find the cautionary tale she'd become. She got into a mediocre design program in Chicago, finally, after Dad made a substantial donation. She lasted 1 semester before dropping out. According to Marissa, who still kept tabs on my family gossip, Victoria had tried to submit modified versions of my designs again, thinking that if she changed them enough, no one would notice. Someone noticed. Victoria was expelled for academic dishonesty. That's when she had her breakdown. I was in my junior year at Yale when I got the call from my mother. Victoria had been hospitalized after a suicide attempt. She was in psychiatric care. The doctor said she'd had a psychotic break, that she'd become dangerously obsessed with me, that she genuinely believed I'd stolen her life. The irony of that was almost too much to bear. "You need to come home," Mom demanded. "You need to tell the truth about what you did to her." What I did to her? I was in the library when she called, and several students looked up at my sharp tone. I lowered my voice. "I protected my work. She stole from me and got caught. That's not my fault. You're her sister. You're supposed to support her, not destroy her." "She destroyed herself," I said coldly. "And if you'd ever actually parented her, if you'd ever told her no or that's not yours or actions have consequences, maybe she wouldn't be where she is now. But you enabled her for 17 years and this is the result. How can you be so cruel? How can you be calling me instead of taking responsibility for what you and Dad created? Victoria is your daughter. Her behavior is your failure, not mine. I'm done paying for your mistakes." I hung up. It was the last time I spoke to my mother for 3 years. Victoria spent 6 weeks in psychiatric care. The doctors diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder and delusional disorder. She'd built such an elaborate fantasy about her own superiority that reality itself had become intolerable. They said she'd need years of therapy and medication to function normally. I felt no pity. I remembered dying on my apartment floor, the taste of almonds, Victoria's fake tears. This was mercy compared to what she'd done to me. She was released into my parents' care with strict instructions about medication and therapy. I heard through the grapevine that she was doing better, that she'd apologized for her past behavior, that she understood now what she'd done wrong. I didn't believe it for a second. I graduated from Yale summa cum laude at 21, 1 year early because I'd taken summer courses and tested out of prerequisites. My graduate collection was featured in Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. Vera Wang, my mentor through the scholarship, offered me a position at her company. I turned it down to launch my own label. Lilypad Studio opened in a small workshop in Brooklyn on my 22nd birthday. This time, I had actual startup capital. The scholarship money, prize winnings from competitions, and a small business loan I'd qualified for based on my portfolio. No trust fund from Grandma Rose. She was still alive, still vibrant, and I visited her monthly because I loved her, not because I expected anything from her. Everything I built myself. Within 6 months, I had celebrity clients. Within a year, I was profitable. Within 18 months, I was being written about as one of the most exciting young designers in New York. My focus on sustainable fashion, on ethical production, on clothes that were both beautiful and responsible, it resonated in a way my first attempt never had. This time, I wasn't just making pretty things. I was making things that mattered. I met Marcus again at a gallery opening in the West Village. He was even more handsome than I remembered, tall and kind-eyed, his hands moving expressively as he discussed the architecture of the space. We talked for 3 hours about design philosophy, about building things that lasted, about integrity and creative work. "You're Lily Whitmore," he said suddenly, recognition dawning. "The designer. I read about you in the Times." "And you're Marcus Chen," I replied, smiling. "The architect. I saw your sustainable housing project in the journal." We started dating slowly, carefully. I was still wary of letting anyone too close, still remembering how Victoria had used Marcus against me. But this Marcus didn't know Victoria. This Marcus met me first, loved me first, chose me first. When I finally told him about my sister, the plagiarism, the psychiatric break, the family dynamics, he listened with quiet compassion. "My brother is similar," he said. "Not as extreme, but there's always been this competition, this resentment. Some people can't stand to see others succeed. It's not your fault, Lily. You didn't create her problems." "I know," I said. And I did know, intellectually. But emotionally, there was still that part of me that had been trained from birth to accommodate Victoria, to make myself smaller so she could feel bigger. Marcus helped me unlearn that, not by pushing, but by consistently seeing me, valuing me, celebrating my successes without jealousy or reservation. He proposed after a year of dating with a ring he'd designed himself, and I said yes. We planned a small wedding, just close friends, Marcus's family, and Grandma Rose. Not my parents, who'd made it clear I was dead to them for what I did to Victoria. Not Victoria herself, obviously. I was happy, I was successful, I was building the life I dreamed of. And then Victoria moved to New York. She showed up at my studio on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was working on a new collection, fabric samples spread across my work table, when my assistant buzzed me. "There's someone here to see you. She says she's your sister." My blood went cold. "Tell her I'm busy?" "She says she'll wait." I considered calling the police, getting a restraining order. But I was curious. What did Victoria want after 3 years of silence? What new game was she playing? I went down to the reception area. Victoria sat in one of my chairs, looking small and tired. She'd gained weight, cut her hair short, wore no makeup. She didn't look like the sister I remembered, polished and perfect and predatory. She looked broken. "Lily," she said when she saw me. Her voice cracked. "Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. I know I don't deserve even that." She stood, hands twisting together. "I know I can never make up for what I did to you. The stealing, the lying, the years of abuse. I've been in therapy for 3 years now, and I'm starting to understand how sick I was, how sick I still am." I said nothing, just waited. I wanted to apologize, really apologize, not the performative bullshit I've done in the past. You deserved better than me as a sister. You deserved parents who protected you instead of enabling me. You deserved to grow up without constantly being undermined and copied, and her voice broke. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." It was a good performance. It might have even been genuine. But I remembered the taste of almonds. I remembered dying. I remembered that Victoria was capable of anything when she felt threatened. "Thank you for the apology," I said formally. "I hope therapy continues to help you." "That's it?" She looked up, surprised. "You're not going to yell at me? Tell me what a monster I am? Would it help?" She faltered. "No, probably not." "Then there's no point. Victoria, I've moved on. I've built a good life. I don't hate you, but I also can't have you in my life. You understand that, right?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I understand." She stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, your work is incredible. The stuff you're doing with sustainable fashion, it's important. It's real. It's what I always wished I could do, but never had the talent or vision for. Thank you." She left. I watched her walk away and felt nothing. No triumph, no anger, no relief. Just a hollow emptiness where my sister used to be. I should have known it wasn't over. Victoria's apology tour continued over the next few months. She reached out to people I'd gone to school with, people in the fashion industry, journalists who'd written about our scandal. She told them all the same story. She'd been sick, she was in recovery, she took full responsibility for her actions. She was humble and contrite and utterly convincing. People started to soften toward her. "Everyone deserves a second chance," they'd say. "She seems like she's really changed." I watched it happen with growing unease. Victoria was playing a long game, rebuilding her reputation brick by brick, positioning herself as a reformed villain who'd learned her lesson. And people loved a redemption story. She enrolled in a design program in New York, a small school but respectable. She worked part-time at a nonprofit focused on sustainable fashion. My field, my passion, the thing I'd built my career on. She volunteered at community centers, teaching sewing to underprivileged kids. She was copying me again, but this time, the copy looked like redemption. I tried to warn Marcus. "She's planning something. This is all an act." "Maybe," he said gently. "Or maybe she really has changed." People can change, Lily. Not Victoria. You're holding on to a lot of anger. Maybe you should talk to someone about it. That stung. Marcus was suggesting I needed therapy because I wouldn't forgive my abuser? Because I recognized a pattern he was too naive to see? We had our first real fight. That night, Marcus said I was paranoid and vengeful. I said he was blind and that Victoria would eventually target him too, that she always destroyed the people I loved. He said I couldn't live my whole life afraid of my sister. She killed me, I said, and then stopped, because of course I couldn't explain that. She would kill me given the chance. That's who she is. Marcus looked at me like I was crazy. We didn't talk about Victoria after that, but I kept watching. Victoria graduated from her design program with honors. She landed an internship at a sustainable fashion nonprofit. She started a blog about ethical fashion that gained modest but steady readership. She built a portfolio that was good, not great, but solid. Derivative of my work, obviously, but subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice. She started dating someone from Marcus's architecture firm. Just a casual thing, she told mutual friends. Nothing serious. The person she was dating was my former intern coordinator from my previous life, the one whose messy breakup with Victoria had cost me my internship. In this timeline, I'd never had that internship. I'd gone straight to launching my own label. But Victoria was still following the same playbook. She was getting close to Marcus's world, building connections, making herself indispensable. And then Grandma Rose died. It was sudden, a stroke in her sleep, peaceful but unexpected. She was 87 and had lived a full life. I was devastated. She'd been my biggest supporter, my sanctuary, the only family member who'd ever really loved me. I found out about the will at the reading. Grandma Rose had left me her brownstone and her trust fund, just as in my previous life. $3 million and a beautiful home in Brooklyn. But she'd also left something to Victoria. $50,000 and a letter. Victoria opened the letter in the lawyer's office, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what it said, she never showed me. But when she looked up, something in her expression made my skin crawl. Grandma Rose forgave me, she said softly. She said everyone deserves grace. I felt sick. Victoria used the $50,000 to launch her own sustainable fashion label, Rose Vine Studio. A name deliberately similar to Lily Pad Studio, a final act of copying that everyone seemed to think was touching tribute to her grandmother. Her first collection was unveiled at a small showcase in the Lower East Side. I didn't attend, but Marcus did. He'd been invited by his colleague who was dating Victoria, and he felt obligated to support family, even if it was my estranged family. He came home that night troubled. Her work is good, he admitted. Really good. And the whole presentation, the branding, the story she told about redemption and learning from her mistakes, people loved it. Did you notice anything familiar about her designs, Vic? I asked. He hesitated. They felt like your aesthetic, but different enough. Inspired by, maybe? Stolen from, I corrected. She's been studying my work for years. She knows how to copy the essence without copying the specifics. Lily, I know you have history with her, but don't you think it's possible she's just working in the same field? Sustainable fashion isn't your exclusive domain. We fought again. Marcus thought I was being unreasonable, possessive, unable to move past old hurts. I thought he was being manipulated, unable to see Victoria's long game. The cracks in our relationship deepened. Victoria's label gained traction. She got write-ups in small fashion blogs, then bigger publications. She told her story everywhere, the reformed plagiarist, the sister who'd learned from her mistakes, the woman who'd found her own voice after years of living in someone else's shadow. The narrative shifted. Suddenly, I was the sister who wouldn't forgive, who held grudges, who couldn't be happy for someone else's success. Victoria was the underdog, the reformed sinner, the phoenix rising from ashes. She was stealing my story, again, and then she made her move on Marcus. It started innocently enough, or so Marcus told me. They ran into each other at an industry event. She apologized for the past, for any discomfort she'd caused. They talked about architecture and fashion, about sustainable design principles, about the overlap in their fields. She was charming and insightful and completely professional. She asked if he'd be interested in collaborating on a project, sustainable housing with integrated textile elements, a fusion of their expertise. Marcus was intrigued. He mentioned it to me. Absolutely not, I said. That's exactly what she wants. What she wants? Lily, it's a professional collaboration. You don't own the concept of sustainable design. She's trying to get close to you to hurt me. That's paranoid. That's experience. But Marcus took the meeting anyway. Then another. Then he started working on preliminary designs with Victoria, meeting at coffee shops and co-working spaces, texting about concepts and ideas. I watched my previous life repeating in slow motion. Victoria insinuating herself into Marcus's professional world, their project becoming more involved, Marcus defending her when I expressed concerns, the distance growing between us. You're so focused on hating your sister that you can't see I'm just trying to do good work, Marcus said after another fight. This project could be amazing, Lily. It could help people. Why can't you support that? Because she doesn't care about helping people. She cares about taking things from me. God, do you hear yourself? Not everything is about you. We broke up on a Wednesday in March. Marcus said he couldn't be with someone who was so consumed by jealousy and past trauma that she couldn't see present reality. I said I couldn't be with someone who was so naive, he couldn't see when he was being manipulated. He moved out of the brownstone I'd inherited from Grandma Rose. I watched him pack his things and felt a strange detachment, like I was watching a play I'd already seen. I knew what came next. Victoria and Marcus started dating 3 months later. It was all very proper, very above board. They'd grown close while working on their collaboration. They'd discovered unexpected feelings. They'd tried to resist out of respect for me, but love won out. The architecture and fashion magazines loved it, the genius architect and the reformed designer, creating sustainable housing together, a power couple for the modern age. I threw myself into my work. Lily Pad Studio was thriving, but I expanded aggressively, opened a second location, took on more commissions than I could handle. I worked 18-hour days. I stopped eating regularly. I lost 15 pounds I didn't need to lose. Marissa staged an intervention. You're spiraling, she said, sitting in my studio at midnight, watching me hand-sew beads onto a dress with shaking fingers. This isn't healthy. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're obsessed with Victoria again. You're letting her control your life by trying so hard to beat her. She's stealing everything, I said. My voice cracked. Just like before, Marcus, my reputation, my narrative. She's doing it again, and this time everyone thinks she's the hero and I'm the villain. So let her have it, Marissa said quietly. Let her have Marcus. Let her have her little label. Let her have whatever she wants. You're still more successful. You're still more talented. You're still the one who actually builds things instead of copying them. Why do you need more than that? Because it's not enough. I looked up at her and I realized I was crying. In my previous life, she took everything and then she killed me. She won't stop until I'm destroyed. She can't help it. It's who she is. Marissa looked at me strangely. Previous life? I froze. I'd never told anyone about my rebirth, about my death, about the memories I carried from a timeline that hadn't happened yet. It sounded insane. I'm just tired, I said. Ignore me. But the truth was I was terrified. Events were aligning with my previous life despite all my changes. Victoria was with Marcus. She was building her reputation in my field. The pieces were falling into place for the final betrayal. The only question was when she'd try to kill me again. The answer came on my 24th birthday. Victoria threw me a surprise party. Or rather, Marcus threw it, but Victoria helped plan it, and that should have been my first warning. It was at a trendy restaurant in Tribeca, filled with friends and colleagues and fashion industry people. Even some of my old Yale professors had flown in. Everyone kept telling me how wonderful it was that Victoria had organized this, how sweet that she wanted to celebrate me, how touching that we'd repaired our relationship. We hadn't, of course, but I'd stopped correcting people. Victoria gave a speech. She talked about how she'd been a terrible sister, how she'd learned and grown, how proud she was of everything I'd accomplished. She cried prettily. People applauded. I smiled and thanked her and felt my skin crawl. After the speech, she brought me tea, chamomile with honey, my favorite, just like in my previous life. A peace offering, she said, pressing the cup into my hands. I know you still don't trust me, but I want you to know I really have changed. I'm not the person I was. I looked down at the tea. It smelled normal, looked normal, probably was normal, but my hands were shaking. I'm not thirsty, I said, setting it down. Please, Victoria said. It would mean a lot to me. A symbolic thing, you know? Sisters sharing tea on your birthday. Everyone was watching. Marcus was watching, standing next to Victoria with his hand on her back, the two of them a unit. If I refused, I'd look paranoid and petty. I picked up the cup and raised it to my lips, and then I stopped, because I could smell it. Faint but unmistakable. Almonds. Time seemed to slow. I looked at Victoria, really looked at her, and saw the anticipation in her eyes. The barely suppressed excitement. The same expression she'd worn in my previous life as she'd watched me die. You know what? I said, my voice remarkably steady. I've changed my mind. I am thirsty after all. Why don't we share it? Sisters sharing tea, like you said. I held the cup out to her. You first. Victoria's face went white, then red, then white again. That's your tea. I made it for you. And it's such a lovely gesture that I want to share it. Come on, Victoria, just a sip. To celebrate our reconciliation. Marcus was frowning now, sensing something wrong. Other people were looking over, confused by the strange tension. I don't really like chamomile, Victoria said weakly. Then why did you bring it to me? I asked. Why did you insist I drink it? Why is it so important that I drink this specific cup of tea that you made? You're being paranoid again. Am I? I stood, still holding the cup. Then you won't mind if we have it tested. Right here, right now. I have a friend who's a toxicologist. She's actually at this party. Should I ask her to run some tests? Victoria's whole body was shaking now. Marcus was staring at her, realization dawning in his eyes. You didn't, he whispered. Tell me you didn't. I don't know what she's talking about, Victoria said, but her voice was too high, too panicked. She's crazy. She's always been crazy and jealous and... Almond smell? I said calmly. Cyanide smells like almonds. Did you know that, Victoria? Did you know that when you put it in my tea? The restaurant went silent. Someone called 911. Victoria tried to run, but Marcus grabbed her arm. She screamed and fought, and suddenly she wasn't the polished, reformed woman anymore. She was raw and desperate and absolutely convinced of her own righteousness. You don't deserve any of this, she shrieked at me. It's mine. It's all mine. You stole my life. You stole my future. You stole everything. I was supposed to be the successful one. I was supposed to be the designer. I was supposed to have Marcus and the business and the recognition. You're just the mistake, the unwanted one, the one who should have never been born. She was still screaming when the police arrived. They tested the tea and found enough cyanide to kill 3 people. They found more in her purse, along with detailed journals documenting her plan, not just to kill me, but to take over my business, my identity, my entire life. The journals were extensive. She'd been planning this for over a year, ever since Grandma Rose's death had given her enough money to start Rosevine Studio. The label had always been a front, a way to position herself to step into my shoes after my tragic death. She'd been copying my designs, my contacts, my entire brand presence. She had passwords to my business accounts that she'd obtained through a keylogger on Marcus's computer. She'd been setting up shell companies to take control of Lilypad Studio after I was gone. And she'd been manipulating Marcus, slowly poisoning his perception of me, making herself seem like the stable, reasonable sister while painting me as paranoid and vindictive. After my death, he would have turned to her for comfort. They'd have bonded over their shared grief. Eventually, they'd have married, just like in my previous life, and she'd have had everything. The police found all of this in her journals. She'd written it all down like a fairy tale where she was the heroine. Marcus was devastated. I didn't see it, he kept saying. I thought you were being unreasonable. I thought she'd changed. How did I not see it? Because she spent her entire life learning how to lie, I said. Because she's that good at being what people want to see. You're not stupid, Marcus. She's just that skilled at manipulation. Victoria was arrested and charged with attempted murder. Her lawyers tried to argue insanity, but the detailed, methodical planning in her journals showed clear premeditation. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. At her sentencing, she looked at me one last time. "I'll never forgive you," she said. "You took everything from me." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. In Victoria's mind, she was the victim of my success, the innocent party wronged by my existence. She would never understand that she'd destroyed herself. The epilogue of my life was sweeter than I ever could have imagined. Lily Pad Studio flourished in the aftermath of the scandal. People were horrified by Victoria's crimes and sympathetic to me. My business grew exponentially. I opened locations in Paris, London, and Tokyo. My sustainable fashion line became an industry standard, copied by major designers but never surpassed. I was invited to speak at the UN about ethical fashion. I won every major fashion award. Marcus and I tried to reconcile after Victoria's arrest, but too much had been damaged. He'd chosen to believe her over me. And while I understood intellectually why that had happened, emotionally, I couldn't move past it. We remained friends, good friends eventually, but we were never lovers again. I met someone else eventually, a documentary filmmaker named Sarah, who was doing a piece on sustainable fashion. She was brilliant and funny and had no interest in the fashion industry beyond her work. She loved me for who I was, not what I could do for her career. We got married on a beach in Costa Rica 3 years after Victoria's sentencing. My parents never apologized, never acknowledged their role in creating Victoria's pathology, never reached out except to ask me to pay for a better lawyer for Victoria's appeal. I declined and blocked their numbers. I bought out the boutique in my hometown where Victoria had worked during her gap year and turned it into a community center offering free job training and mental health services. I named it Rose's Place, after Grandma Rose. It was petty, perhaps, but satisfying. Marissa became my business partner and COO. She'd always had brilliant organizational skills, and together we built Lily Pad Studio into a fashion empire. We employed over 300 people. We donated millions to charity. We changed the industry. I visited Victoria once in prison, 5 years into her sentence. She looked older, harder, her hair graying prematurely. She'd been in several fights with other inmates. She'd tried to start her own fashion line using other prisoners' commissary money, but had been shut down for fraud. "Why did you come?" she asked me across the visiting room table. "I wanted to see if you'd changed." "Have I?" "No," I said. "You still think you're the victim. You still think I stole your life instead of just living my own." "Because you did," she said, but without heat. She just sounded tired. "Everything you have should have been mine. I was supposed to be special. Mom said I was special." "We were both supposed to be loved," I said quietly. "That's all. Not special, not better than the other. Just loved. But they loved you to the point of destruction, and they rejected me to the point of resilience. In the end, I think I got the better deal." I left and never visited again. Years passed. Lily Pad Studio became a legacy brand. I won the CFDA Lifetime Achievement Award at 42. I adopted 2 children with Sarah. I learned to paint again, like I had as a child before Victoria had stolen that from me. I found peace. Victoria was released from prison after 18 years for good behavior. She moved to a halfway house in New Jersey. She worked at a dry cleaner. She was forbidden by the terms of her parole from working in fashion or contacting me. She violated parole 6 months after her release by creating a social media account, where she posted designs and claimed to be a misunderstood artist. Her parole was revoked. She went back to prison for another 3 years. I heard she started therapy again, real therapy this time, the kind that requires taking responsibility instead of playing victim. I heard she finally began to understand what she'd done, the lives she'd destroyed, the future she'd thrown away. I heard a lot of things, but I didn't care enough to verify them. Victoria was a chapter in my past, not a character in my present. She'd stolen years from me in both my lives, but she couldn't steal my future. That belonged to me alone. On my 50th birthday, Sarah threw me a party. Not at a trendy restaurant, but in our garden, surrounded by flowers and friends and our teenage children. I wore a simple white dress that I'd designed myself, my nails painted with clear polish, elegant and understated. I was happy. I was successful. I was loved. Someone proposed a toast and everyone raised their glasses. Clear crystal catching the afternoon light, refracting it into rainbows. To Lily, Marissa said, who taught us all that the best revenge is living authentically. I drank and smiled and thought about nail polish, about how Victoria had spent her whole life copying surface details while missing the fundamental truth. Authenticity can't be stolen, talent can't be faked, and a life built on lies will always collapse eventually. My sister had copied everything about me except the one thing that mattered, the courage to be myself, and that made all the difference.